We think of the Middle Ages as a time of stagnation, but our modern world is built on its quiet ingenuity. Many everyday objects we rely on, from the glasses on your face to the buttons on your shirt, were born from medieval minds solving practical problems. This journey through 20 groundbreaking inventions will completely reshape your understanding of this dynamic era, revealing how tools from the forge, the field, and the workshop laid the foundation for our contemporary lives. How did a simple fastening like the button change the very shape of clothing? What allowed sailors to finally conquer the open ocean? By the end, you will see the so-called Dark Ages in an entirely new light, not as a period of darkness, but as a crucible of creation. What common item in your own home do you think might have a secret medieval origin? The term Dark Ages itself is a profound misnomer, casting a long shadow over centuries of dynamic change. Following the collapse of Roman authority, Europe did not simply plunge into an intellectual abyss. Instead, it entered a period of intense adaptation, where localized societies were forced to build new systems from the ground up. This was not an empty void but a fertile ground for reinvention. The old Roman networks of trade and administration had shattered, but in their place, new social structures like feudalism provided a framework for local stability and resource management. Monasteries became unexpected powerhouses of progress, where monks meticulously preserved classical knowledge while also conducting their own experiments in agriculture, medicine, and mechanics. Simultaneously, Europe was not an isolated island. It was part of a much wider world, engaging in a constant, if sometimes slow, exchange of ideas with the advanced civilizations of the Islamic world and the distant empires of Asia. Through trade routes and cultural contact, technologies like the astrolabe for navigation and advanced mathematics filtered westward, cross-pollinating with local ingenuity. In the burgeoning towns, the concentration of people and the rise of specialized crafts guilds created a competitive environment where improving a tool or a technique could mean the difference between prosperity and poverty. This unique convergence of preserved knowledge, cultural exchange, and practical necessity created a crucible. It was within this vibrant, often overlooked context that the quiet revolution of medieval invention began to simmer, setting the stage for the breakthroughs we are about to explore. The relentless rhythm of the peasant's year was set not by the clock but by the sun and the seasons. For the vast majority, everyday life was a world away from the pageantry of knights and kings. It was a world of soil and sweat defined by the grueling demands of subsistence farming. From dawn until dusk, men and women worked the land with simple tools, their survival hinging on the success of the harvest. In the towns, artisans labored with their hands, shaping everything from shoes to candles through slow, meticulous effort. This was an existence measured in physical toil, where a single bad harvest could mean hunger, and where every task, from grinding grain to weaving cloth, demanded immense time and muscle power. It is precisely within this challenging context that the genius of medieval invention truly shines. These were not luxuries for the few, but practical solutions to universal problems. The innovations we are about to uncover gave people a crucial advantage in their daily struggle, offering them leverage against the forces of nature and the sheer exhaustion of manual labor. They saved precious hours, boosted the yield from a field, or simply made a common chore less back-breaking. To understand these inventions is to understand how ordinary people slowly but surely carved out a better life from a difficult world. One of the most transformative tools to emerge from this era of practical ingenuity was the humble wheelbarrow. Picture a medieval construction site, a cacophony of chisels and hammers, where teams of workers struggled to move heavy stones and piles of mortar by hand. The arrival of the wheelbarrow was nothing short of a logistical miracle. It was a brilliantly simple machine, a lever on a single wheel. Before its widespread use, moving a heavy load like a block of stone often required two people using a litter, a slow and exhausting process. The wheelbarrow changed everything. By placing a single wheel at the front, the design ingeniously transferred the weight of the load from the carrier's straining arms and back onto the axle. This meant one person could now do the work of two, effectively doubling the efficiency of a workforce. The physical strain was dramatically reduced, leading to less fatigue and fewer injuries on the job. This was not merely a better way to move dirt, it was a catalyst that accelerated the very pace of medieval life. From the soaring walls of cathedrals to the daily chores of the farmstead, the wheelbarrow moved more than just material, it moved progress itself, one loaded trip at a time. While the wheelbarrow moved the earth, a far more powerful machine was busy reshaping it entirely. The dense, wet clay soils of northern Europe presented a formidable challenge to early farmers. For generations, they had relied on the simple scratch plow, a tool that barely skimmed the surface of this tough, unforgiving land. It was exhausting work with meager returns, leaving vast tracts of fertile soil locked away and useless. Then came the heavy plow, a technological marvel that would literally carve a new future out of the wilderness. This was no mere upgrade, it was a revolution on three wheels. Its design was a masterclass in problem solving. A sharp, vertical coulter blade led the way, slicing deep into the sod. Next, a horizontal share cut the base of the furrow. But the true genius was the mold board, a curved plate that lifted the cut strip of earth, turned it completely over, and deposited it to the side. This single action was transformative. It effectively aerated the dense soil, bringing rich nutrients to the surface and burying weeds, which then decomposed and fertilized the land naturally. Suddenly, the stubborn clay that had resisted cultivation for centuries became Europe's breadbasket. The impact was monumental. For the first time, farmers could reliably work this rich land, leading to consistent and substantial agricultural surpluses. This abundance of food was the fundamental fuel for everything that followed. It supported a dramatic surge in population as more people could be fed. It freed a segment of that population from working the land entirely, allowing them to move to growing towns to become artisans, merchants, and scholars. The heavy plow did not just plant crops, it planted the seeds of villages, towns, and the entire economic boom of the High Middle Ages. It turned a landscape of struggle into one of prosperity. But this agricultural revolution was not powered by machinery alone. It also demanded a new kind of engine, one of flesh and blood. For centuries, the patient, plodding ox had been the farmer's primary partner in the fields. Yet as the heavy plow opened up vast new tracts of land, a pressing limitation became clear. Oxen were strong, but they were painfully slow. The obvious alternative was the horse, an animal renowned for its speed and greater endurance. But there was a deadly problem. The traditional harness used for oxen, a simple wooden yoke placed across the neck, was a design that proved lethal for horses. When a horse leaned into its pull, the rigid yoke would press directly against its windpipe, slowly choking the animal and drastically reducing its ability to exert force. A horse equipped with this ancient harness could barely pull its own weight, let alone a heavy plow through thick soil. The solution emerged in the form of a deceptively simple innovation, the padded horse collar. This was not just a new piece of tack, it was a physiological masterpiece of engineering. Crafted from stuffed leather and rigid staves, the collar curved comfortably around the horse's neck and settled snugly onto its powerful shoulders and chest. This clever redesign was everything. Instead of crushing the airway, the collar allowed the horse to push with its entire body, transferring the immense strain of pulling to the strongest parts of its skeleton and musculature. The effect was immediate and breathtaking. A horse in a proper collar could pull up to 5 times the load it could with the old yoke. Suddenly, farmers could plow fields in a fraction of the time, covering more acreage in a single season than ever before. This was more than just an upgrade. It was like switching from a slow, steady diesel engine to a high-performance race car. The horse collar unlocked the true potential of equine power, supercharging medieval agriculture and helping to feed the growing towns that were beginning to reshape the European landscape. While the horse collar unlocked new power on land, another brilliant invention was capturing energy from the very sea itself. The Tidal mill stands as a monument to medieval foresight, a machine that literally ran on the gravitational pull of the moon. Common river mills were powerful, but they held a critical weakness. They were slaves to the seasons, their wheels slowing to a halt during summer droughts or freezing solid in the winter. Coastal communities needed a more reliable way to grind their grain, and they found it not in the flowing river, but in the rhythmic pulse of the ocean. The engineering was both simple and profound. Builders would construct a sturdy dam known as a causeway across a small tidal inlet or estuary. Within this dam was a crucial gate, the sluice. As the tide surged in, the gate would open, allowing seawater to flood the basin behind the dam. Then, at the peak of high tide, the gate was closed, trapping a huge reservoir of water. Now came the moment of power. As the tide receded, the sea level outside the dam would drop, but the mill pond remained full. The only escape for this captured water was through a narrow channel, where it was funneled directly onto the blades of a mill wheel. The resulting rush of water spun the wheel with immense force, driving the grinding stones inside the mill. This was a completely automated, predictable system. The miller did not need to worry about rain or drought. He simply consulted the tides, knowing that twice a day, without fail, the ocean would deliver the energy he needed. This was renewable power in its purest medieval form, a clever partnership with nature that kept the bread baking in coastal villages for centuries. The relentless drive for efficiency that reshaped farms and harnessed the tides also found its way to the most intimate of human struggles, the slow fading of sight. For an aging scribe in a quiet monastery scriptorium, the world he had dedicated his life to preserving was gradually slipping into a blur. The precise strokes of ink on parchment, the delicate illuminations that brought sacred texts to life, all became an impossible challenge as his eyes lost their ability to focus on close work. This condition, presbyopia, was an unavoidable fate that threatened to silence the very hands responsible for copying and creating knowledge. Then, in the workshops of late 13th century Italy, a quiet miracle occurred. An unknown artisan mounted 2 simple convex lenses into a frame that could balance on the bridge of the nose. The invention of eyeglasses was a moment of profound liberation. Suddenly, the blurred lines on the page snapped back into perfect, crisp clarity. A master goldsmith could once again chase intricate patterns into metal. A scholar could resume his studies without straining to read the cramped handwriting of a precious manuscript. This was far more than a simple convenience. It was a direct defense against the erosion of skill and wisdom. By extending the productive working lives of artisans and intellectuals by decades, spectacles ensured that a lifetime of accumulated expertise was not lost but could instead be passed on, refined, and built upon by the next generation. They became a shield for human intellect, allowing the focused light of one mind to illuminate the path for many more to come. While spectacles brought the world into focus for the individual, a new invention was about to synchronize the rhythm of life for entire communities. Before the mechanical clock, time was a fluid, personal experience. It was measured by the slow arc of the sun, the steady drip of a water clock, or the silent fall of sand in an hourglass. Life moved to the rhythm of tasks, from milking the cows at first light to closing the shutters at dusk. This all changed in the 14th century with the arrival of the weight-driven mechanical clock. These were not small, personal devices. They were monumental machines of iron and brass, often installed high in the bell towers of churches and town halls for all to see and hear. Their deep, resonant chimes would ring out across the rooftops, marking the hours for everyone within earshot. This was a profound shift. For the first time, a whole town could live by the same measure of time. The clock told the merchants when to open the market, it called the faithful to prayer at the exact same moment, and it signaled the start and end of the working day for the guilds. The day was no longer a series of tasks to be completed, but a collection of hours to be filled. This new, regimented time began to impose a fresh discipline on the medieval mind. Work in the artisan's workshop was now regulated by the clock, with labor measured in hours rather than by the completion of a single item. This transition from task-oriented time to clock-oriented time was a quiet revolution in human consciousness. The steady, mechanical tick-tock echoing from the tower became the heartbeat of the emerging modern world, a rhythm of order and efficiency we still live by today. The steady tick of the town clock brought new order to the workday, yet for countless women, the most tedious labor began after the sun went down. Spinning fiber into thread was a universal chore, a task as ancient as civilization itself. For millennia, it was done with a distaff and spindle, a process that demanded constant, skilled hand motion. A spinner would hold a bundle of flax or wool fibers on a distaff tucked under her arm. Then, with her other hand, she would deftly draw out a few fibers, twist them between her fingers, and attach them to a whirling spindle that dangled precariously below. It was slow, painstaking work that consumed countless hours just to produce a single skein of thread. Then, around the 13th century, a new device began to appear in European homes that would transform this domestic landscape. The spinning wheel mechanized the age-old rhythm of the spindle. Its genius lay in a simple foot pedal called a treadle. With a steady pumping motion, the spinner could now turn a large wheel, which was connected by a drive band to a smaller spindle. This mechanism continuously twisted the fibers as they were fed from the distaff, all while the spinner's hands remained free to guide and manage the thread. The physical effort was dramatically reduced, but the real revolution was in speed. A spinner using a wheel could produce thread many times faster than she ever could with a hand spindle. This single innovation became the engine of the burgeoning textile industry. Suddenly, the bottleneck in cloth production was broken. More thread could be woven into more fabric, making wool and linen cloth more affordable and available than ever before. The economics of clothing and trade were fundamentally altered, turning a once purely domestic craft into a cornerstone of the medieval economy and dressing society in a new abundance. The steady hum of the spinning wheel created the very fabric of society, but it was a different kind of control out on the open ocean that would weave the world together. For centuries, sailors navigated the seas with a critical weakness, a large steering oar mounted on the side of the ship. This cumbersome paddle, while better than nothing, was a constant battle. It was terribly inefficient, requiring immense muscle power to maneuver, and it was dangerously vulnerable in rough seas, often shattering against the waves. More critically, it limited the size and seaworthiness of vessels, tethering them to safer coastal routes. The breakthrough came with a simple yet profound shift in position. Instead of a side oar, shipwrights began fixing a flat, vertical blade directly to the stern, the very back of the ship, aligning it perfectly with the center line of the hull. This was the Stern-Mounted Rudder. Its true genius lay in the hardware that made it work, a set of iron fittings known as pintles and gudgeons. The pintles were sturdy pins on the rudder itself, which slotted neatly into the gudgeons, the rings attached to the ship's sternpost. This created a robust, hinged connection that allowed the rudder to pivot smoothly from side to side with a simple turn of the tiller. The effect on a ship's handling was nothing short of revolutionary. With this central pivot point, a helmsman could now exert incredible leverage over the vessel's direction. A small movement of the tiller translated into a sharp, precise turn of the entire ship. This new level of control was transformative. It allowed ships to sail more effectively against the wind, tacking in a zigzag pattern that was nearly impossible with a clumsy steering oar. It also meant ships could be built larger and heavier to carry more cargo, as the stern rudder could handle the increased load and hydrodynamic forces. Suddenly, the treacherous waters of the North Atlantic and the vast expanse of the open ocean became less intimidating. This single piece of maritime engineering gave sailors the confidence to venture farther from shore, to trust their ability to steer through storms and navigate unknown currents. The Stern-Mounted Rudder was the indispensable key that unlocked the great age of exploration, setting the stage for the voyages that would ultimately connect continents and reshape the map of the world. That same hunger for control that mastered the seas also demanded stronger materials back on land. Medieval Europe was running out of iron. The old methods of smelting, using small bloomery forges, were painfully slow and inefficient. A bloomery could only produce a spongy, impure mass of iron that then required days of relentless hammering by a blacksmith to beat out the slag. It was a bottleneck that stifled progress, limiting the supply of metal for everything from plowshares to swords. The solution emerged from the forests and hillsides, a towering stone structure that would roar with unprecedented power, the blast furnace. This was not merely a larger forge, it was a completely different principle. Its key innovation was a set of massive, water-powered bellows that forced a continuous blast of air directly into the heart of the fire. This constant, powerful stream of oxygen supercharged the combustion, driving temperatures to heights previously thought impossible. Inside the blistering chamber, something miraculous occurred. The iron ore did not just soften into a pasty bloom, it completely melted, transforming into a searing, liquid river of metal. This molten iron, known as pig iron because it was often channeled into a main trench with smaller molds branching off like piglets suckling, could now be poured directly into waiting molds of sand or clay. The implications were staggering. Suddenly, intricate objects could be cast in a single step, from firebacks for hearths to the delicate tracery of window frames. The production of iron was no longer a slow, artisanal craft but an industrial process. This newfound abundance of high-quality, affordable iron cascaded through every level of society. Farmers could now afford more durable plowshares and scythes that lasted for seasons. Builders used stronger iron nails and structural reinforcements. And on the battlefield, the age of chainmail was ending, giving way to the brilliant, full-body suits of plate armor that defined the late medieval knight. The blast furnace did not just melt metal, it forged the very bones of a new age, creating a world built increasingly of iron. The blast furnace forged a world of iron, but it was a much smaller, more delicate object that would reshape the human form. Before the button, getting dressed was a complicated affair. Garments were largely loose and baggy, held together by a precarious collection of belts, brooches, and straight pins that stabbed through the fabric. This was not just an inconvenience, it was a limitation on design and movement. A cloak might be fastened with a heavy, expensive brooch, while a tunic could be laced so tightly it restricted breathing. Then, in 13th century Germany, a perfect partnership was born, the marriage of the button and the buttonhole. This was not merely a new fastener, it was a sartorial key. The simple act of pushing a disc through a slit in the fabric created a secure, adjustable closure that could be placed anywhere along a seam. Suddenly, clothing could be designed to follow the contours of the body. Tailors could now create fitted sleeves that allowed for greater arm movement and close-fitting doublets that provided warmth without bulk. This was a revolution in personal expression and practicality. For the first time, fashion became accessible across social classes. A wealthy merchant might display his status with buttons made of polished jet or silver, while a common laborer used simple wooden or bone ones to keep his coat snug against the wind. The button did not just fasten cloth, it unlocked the very idea of tailored clothing, giving every individual a new way to define their silhouette and their place in the world. High atop a lonely hill, its sails catching the steady sea breeze, the vertical windmill stood as a defiant symbol of human ingenuity. This was not the first windmill, but its design was a masterstroke. Earlier horizontal mills, with their sails spinning directly on a vertical shaft, were cumbersome and inefficient. The European innovation was to mount the sails on a horizontal axle, a seemingly small change that unlocked immense power. This central axle was connected through a complex system of wooden gears to the heavy millstones below. When the wind filled the canvas-covered sails, it set the entire wooden structure into a groaning, rhythmic motion, transforming the invisible force of the air into the tangible work of grinding grain. The true brilliance of this machine was its independence. A watermill was chained to its river, but a windmill could be built anywhere the wind blew consistently, on arid plains or high ground far from any flowing water. This freedom opened vast new territories for settlement and industry. Villages could now process their own flour without relying on distant riverside mills. In the Low Countries, windmills were adapted to become powerful pumps, their relentless turning draining marshes and reclaiming land from the sea, literally expanding the borders of nations. The vertical windmill was more than a rustic landmark. It was a versatile engine that tapped directly into the planet's own weather systems, proving that the very air could be put to work. Out on the open ocean, where the sea and sky merge into an endless gray expanse, a sailor's greatest fear was not the storm, but the silence that came after. When the clouds swallowed the sun by day and blotted out the stars by night, a ship became utterly lost, adrift in a featureless void with no sense of direction. It was in this disorienting nothingness that a small, miraculous device from the East changed everything. The magnetic compass, a Chinese innovation that traveled the Silk Road to medieval Europe, seemed to possess a kind of magic. Its principle was elegantly simple. A magnetized iron needle floating on a straw in a bowl of water or pivoting on a pin would tremble and then steadfastly point toward the magnetic north. This was not a guess or an interpretation. It was a constant physical truth pulled from the earth itself. For the first time, a captain could peer into a wooden box and know his heading with confidence, even in a pitch-black fog or a howling gale. This reliable reference point transformed maritime psychology. Voyages were no longer acts of pure faith or desperate coastal hugging. Mariners could now plot straighter, more efficient courses across open water, drastically cutting travel time for spice-laden merchant ships. The compass reduced the immense risk of becoming hopelessly lost, injecting a new level of calculated bravery into exploration. It was this tool, more than any other, that gave sailors the courage to finally turn their prows away from the familiar shoreline and venture into the vast, uncharted blue, setting a course for the new world and forever mapping the boundaries of the known globe. That same magnetic pull that guided sailors home could also summon an earth-shaking force of destruction. The deep, percussive roar of the cannon was a sound that announced the end of an era. Its arrival on European battlefields in the 14th century began as a chaotic spectacle. The earliest bombards were little more than crude iron barrels, prone to exploding with as much danger to their crews as to the enemy. Yet even in their infancy, they represented a terrifying new principle of warfare, one powered by the controlled explosion of gunpowder. As foundries mastered the art of casting stronger bronze and iron, these novelties evolved into true engines of war. The massive siege cannons that emerged could hurl stone or iron balls weighing hundreds of pounds with unimaginable force. For centuries, the tall, thick stone walls of a castle had been the ultimate symbol of security and feudal power. A lord safe behind his ramparts could withstand a siege for months or even years, but now those same walls trembled and cracked under a sustained cannonade. A single, well-placed shot could collapse a fortified tower in a cloud of dust and rubble, rendering the defender's greatest advantage utterly useless. This was more than just a new weapon, it was a profound social and military revolution. The code of chivalry, built around the supremacy of the armored knight on his warhorse, was suddenly obsolete. A nobleman's lifetime of training in sword and lance was meaningless against a deafening blast that could strike him down from hundreds of yards away. The thunder of the cannon did not just breach castle walls, it shattered the entire feudal order, paving the way for the rise of centralized states with the wealth to fund these expensive new armies. Warfare was no longer a contest of personal bravery but a brutal calculation of firepower, echoing a destructive potential we still live with today. The thunder of the cannon shattered old forms of power, but it was a quieter, more persistent sound that would rebuild the world in its wake. This was the rhythmic clunk of the printing press, a machine whose component parts were all forged in the medieval workshop. While Johannes Gutenberg's famous Bible marks a Renaissance milestone, the press itself is a culmination of centuries of prior ingenuity. The crucial concept of movable type, for instance, was not a new idea. The Chinese and Koreans had experimented with it for generations, but it was the European environment of alphabetic script and metalworking that made it truly viable. The sturdy screw press, a familiar sight in every winery and paper mill for generations, provided the perfect, powerful mechanism to apply even pressure across a form. And the dense, sticky oil-based inks that gave Gutenberg's pages their legendary crispness were a direct result of medieval experiments in pigment and varnish. When Gutenberg assembled these existing pieces into a single, elegant system, he unlocked a force far greater than any cannon. For the first time in human history, a book was not a unique, hand-copied artifact that took a scribe a year to produce. It was a commodity. A single press could run off hundreds of identical copies in a fraction of the time, each one perfect, each one affordable to a merchant or a scholar, not just a king or a cardinal. This was the true explosion, an information revolution that democratized knowledge itself. Suddenly, a controversial idea could not be easily suppressed by burning a single manuscript. Scientific discoveries, religious debates, and political manifestos could spread across a continent in months, not decades, creating a shared conversation among people who had never met. The printing press did not just make books, it made the modern mind, creating a public sphere of readers and thinkers, and setting the stage for everything from the Reformation to the scientific revolution. Yet the most profound medieval defenses were not built of stone but of time. As the Black Death swept across continents, leaving devastation in its wake, the bustling port city of Ragusa faced an invisible enemy it could not fight with swords or walls. In 1377, its rulers made a desperate, radical decision. They decreed that all ships arriving from plague-infested regions must wait at anchor for a full 30 days before any person or cargo could step ashore. They called this period the Trentino. This was not a punishment, but a brilliant, if grim, calculation. It was a recognition that the sickness traveled with people and their goods, and that by imposing a period of isolation, the city could break the chain of transmission. This 30-day waiting period was later extended to 40 days, giving us the term we still use today, quarantine, from the Italian word for 40, quaranta. The conceptual leap here was monumental. In an age where disease was often seen as a divine punishment or a miasma in the air, the idea of a mandated isolation was a stark turn toward rational, evidence-based medicine. It acknowledged that illness had a physical cause that could be intercepted through systematic action. The healthy could be protected from the sick by the simple, brutal barrier of time. This was the birth of public health policy, a declaration that a community could actively defend itself against microscopic invaders it could not even see, using nothing more than patience and procedure as its shield. The steady rhythm of the printing press created a demand for knowledge, but it was an earlier invention that first built the very system for producing and certifying it. Amid the intellectual ferment of the 12th century, a new kind of community began to form in cities like Bologna and Paris. It was not a guild of weavers or blacksmiths, but a guild of masters and students, a universitas. This was the birth of the university, a social invention that would institutionalize learning for centuries to come. For the first time, higher education was not a privilege granted by a lone scholar in a private library or a monk in a secluded cloister. It was a structured, permanent corporation with a standardized curriculum, formal lectures, and rigorous examinations. A student could journey from England to Italy and find the same core texts, the same logical methods of disputation, and the same path to a recognized degree. This system of degrees, from bachelor to master to doctor, created a certified class of professionals, men trained in law, medicine, and theology who could administer kingdoms, argue cases in royal courts, and care for the sick with a shared foundation of knowledge. The university became a living repository, a place where ideas were not just stored but actively debated, challenged, and advanced through collaborative argument. It transformed scholarship from a solitary pursuit into a vibrant, enduring enterprise, creating an engine for intellectual progress whose basic structure still powers our world today. Soaring stone skeletons began to arch away from the walls of Europe's great churches. These external ribs, known as flying buttresses, solved a problem that had long grounded architectural ambition. Builders wanted to reach higher toward the heavens and fill their sacred spaces with divine light, but the immense weight of a tall stone roof pushed outward, threatening to topple the very walls that supported it. The flying buttress was the brilliant answer, a structural exoskeleton that caught this outward thrust. It worked like a steadfast shoulder, bracing the high wall from the outside. The weight from the vaulted ceiling was channeled along the graceful curve of the stone arch and safely directed down to a massive pier of masonry set firmly in the ground, far from the main building. This externalization of force was a revolutionary concept. It meant the interior walls were no longer the primary load-bearing element. They were freed from their crushing burden. And what did the builders do with this new liberty? They turned solid stone into shimmering light, replacing vast sections of the wall with immense, intricate panels of stained glass. Walking into a Gothic cathedral was no longer like entering a fortress. It was an experience of weightlessness and wonder. The stone structure seemed to dissolve into a kaleidoscope of color, with biblical stories told in ruby reds, sapphire blues, and emerald greens. The flying buttress did not just hold up a roof, it supported a vision, transforming heavy architecture into an atmosphere of spiritual awe that still takes our breath away. Out on the open sea, time itself seemed to dissolve into the rhythm of the waves. A Sunday was useless under cloud-covered skies, and a water clock would slosh and spill its contents with every pitch and roll of the deck. In this unstable world, sailors needed a timekeeper that was as rugged and reliable as they were. Their solution was the hourglass, a device of beautiful simplicity. Two glass bulbs connected by a narrow neck held just enough fine, dry sand to take exactly 1 hour to drain from top to bottom. Its operation was immune to the sea's constant motion. A sailor would simply invert it the moment the last grain fell, marking another hour passed with a turn of his wrist. This consistent trickle became the heartbeat of the ship, the fundamental unit of maritime life. It was essential for the crucial task of navigation, where knowing the time was the key to knowing your position. To measure the ship's speed, a sailor would heave a chip log, a weighted piece of wood tied to a knotted rope over the stern. As the ship moved away from the log, he would count how many knots slipped through his fingers in the time it took the sand in a 30-second glass to empty. This is the origin of the term, not as a measure of speed. Beyond navigation, the hourglass imposed order on the crew itself. It regulated the watches, the shifts that kept the ship functioning day and night. A sailor's life was divided into these measured periods of labor and rest, each one defined by the turning of the glass. This unassuming device brought a fragile but vital discipline to the timeless expanse of the ocean, allowing sailors to parcel out their most precious resource and venture farther into the unknown than ever before. From the wheelbarrow to the quarantine, these 20 inventions reveal a medieval world far from dark, a world pulsating with creativity and practical problem-solving. They remind us that progress is often a slow accumulation of small, clever solutions to everyday challenges. These tools did not just make life easier, they expanded human potential, reshaped societies, and laid the technological groundwork for the entire modern era. The next time you glance at a clock or fasten a button, remember the medieval minds that made it possible. If you found this journey through history enlightening, subscribe for more deep dives into the past and share which medieval invention you think had the biggest impact in the comments below.